Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to this podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will have you coming back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back and hope that today's episode is one that you will find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into our main event, for my listeners on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes of this podcast. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. And for my people who like to contribute financially to help us grow this platform, there are four ways in which you can do that. The first is through Cash App with our handle, $IDTALK4ED, Venmo with the handle @Kwame SM. And if you're online and you have a PayPal account, you can simply go to the URL paypal.me/Kwame SM. And then for my day ones, for those who have been listening to the Identity Talk for Educators Live podcast over the past 5 years, if you really love the content that you've been receiving over that time, you can consider becoming a forum member. So the forum is our new exclusive membership space for those in the Identity Talk community. And with that membership, you will get some behind the scenes footage of the podcast and other things Identity Talk that the rest of the public will not see, some things behind the paywall, some other perks, other incentives. So if that sounds like something that you would like to have, please make sure you consider getting a membership so you can get access to those things. And as always, to learn more about the forum and the podcast and also to catch up on past episodes, you can go to our main website at identitytalk4educators.com. Now, for my people who love to read and you're looking for more books to add to your library, particularly for my teachers who are coming back to their schools to start a new school year, please consider adding Learn to Relearn to your professional library. This is a book that is all about humanity. So if you are somebody who is all about creating and cultivating identity affirming classrooms and environments for young people and others, this is a book that you want to have in your library. And I want to take this time to thank all those who have purchased copies, all those who have taken selfies of the book, all those who have shared this book with their friends and colleagues and loved ones and have recommended it to so many other people. I appreciate all the support because as an independent author, it is very difficult to garner that support. We don't always have that strong backing. So every ounce of it I appreciate. Now, if you're someone that has read the book and you've had it for a while, please consider leaving a review either on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you leave your reviews. That way we can increase the visibility of the book across different platforms. And if you're someone that's just curious about what this book is about and you want to learn more, you can go to our website at learntorelearn.com to learn more. Thank you so much. And we're going to get into our main event right now. So we have another guest that is going to come here and share her story. And this is one that is pretty common in the international school ecosystem. So often we hear stories about third culture kids, we hear stories about students and even adults who have lived transient lifestyles, lived in different cultural contexts, lived in multiple countries, and those different experiences have shaped the way that they view the world, but also view themselves. So this is going to be another episode where we're going to get a bit introspective and really go deep into how those experiences growing up help us to shape how we not only see the world, but also how we should see others within the worlds that we're in. So I'm going to bring on a phenomenal educator who's going to provide us with some perspective on this topic. So without further ado, I want to bring on Loretta Fernando-Smith to the podcast. to talk to us about the importance of centering the humanity of our young people and others. So let's bring Loretta on to start this conversation. Hello.
Hi, Kwame. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
How are we doing today?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah. It's late in the day where I am. My feet currently touch the ground in Frankfurt, Germany. And so it's evening, and I've just told my two teenage boys to get themselves to bed. So there's calmness
Mm,
that has returned to the household.
yeah, two young sons. So I have a 7-year old and a 2-year old. They're both in bed. So this is the time where I'm able to get some stuff done,
I remember.
including recording a podcast. So
Yeah, exactly. I
exciting
remember when
time.
my kids were little, I would tell them to go to sleep at 6:30. And I think it was like fifth grade when my oldest was like, nobody else in my class goes to sleep at 6:30. I was like, okay, we can negotiate bedtime, but when am I going to get everything else done?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those
that's
times.
always a struggle, but that's adulting for you, especially as parents. Just got to figure out how to squeeze the time in, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you find that your kids are listening to all these podcasts, educational podcasts that you've been listening to, and they start to
Mhm.
offer like sort of philosophical advice on education and pedagogy and teaching and learning. And yeah, so there are benefits too. You end up having conversations, quite deep ones with them.
Yeah, so I'm sure they see a lot of moms' content out there and they have their own thoughts around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And valid thoughts too. So yeah.
That's what's up. So Loretta,
Yeah.
um, we always like to start from the beginning, and we'll definitely dig into your early childhood and how you got here. But I want to start off with a simple question to open things up, and that is, who or what inspired you to want to become an educator?
So I'm a fourth generation educator. My mom was a teacher. My grandpa was an early years educator. My great grandfather was in leadership. And so
Wow.
my aunt was an educator. My sister was in education. So I feel like it was just one of those things that I remember being a little kid and like lecturing the trees in the garden and telling everybody that I was going to be a teacher when I grew up, right? So it was one of those things that I felt like that's who I had always been. So it was very, very early on that I knew that I wanted to be an educator. And I'd have to say that my grandfather is probably the person that continues to inspire me. He's no longer on the earth, but being an early years educator and a lover of stories, the way that he showed up in the world is the way that I now strive to show up as well. So yeah, I'd say my grandpa.
Wow. So this was always the path.
Yeah, like always, right? So I always, yeah, so I always thought that I wanted to be an educator, and that's, I went to university. I was in a special program. It was a Con Ed program, so you were doing your BA and your BED at the same time. It was awesome because I got to try out all these different grade levels. So I thought I was actually going to become a high school math and English teacher, and I went into high school for my student teaching placement. And I mean, I think I looked younger than some of the kids in the hallway. I got offered pot and alcohol my first day there. I still remember this boy who was like, "What's your name?" I was like, "Miss Fernando, and can I see your hall pass, please?" His name was David. For the rest of the time, I was like, "Hi, David." And he'd be like, "She's a teacher." So, that just was different than what I think I'd expected it to be. And then the next year, we had to do a placement in a younger grade level, lower elementary. And so I
Hmm.
ended up in a kindergarten classroom, absolutely loved it, and thought, this is where I want to be. And so I did my degree. I had my first job in Singapore at 22, went off. I loved my job, loved teaching. And then sort of had this moment of, what am I doing? Like, I'm a fourth generation educator. That's what I've always kind of focused on. What if there's more to life? What if I shouldn't be an educator? Like, I love the arts and traveling, and maybe I just chose the easy path. And so I actually quit my job, bought a backpacked across Australia, realized partway through that I cannot live out of a backpack and I do not like bush camping. So that's the first thing. But the second thing was that I actually really missed being around kids and their
Right.
curiosity. And so I ended up volunteering and working for families and doing things. And my roommate from Singapore got a job in Germany. And so she called me up and said, I think you speak German. Do you want this bilingual job? Like, you should apply. And I thought, yep, I got 2 degrees. I should, start doing something with them. So I went back into teaching in the classroom. And at that point, that year off and that backpacking across Australia sort of just reconfirmed to me that that is where I wanted to be. And I wasn't just doing it because it was in my family and that's what's always been done. And it was the easy way out. It was, no, it was
Mhm.
truly what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, so kind of always known, but then had a moment of doubt, tried something else and realized, no, I really love being around children and learning and yeah, and that curiosity.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable for us as teachers to have that sabbatical and to have that time to really reflect and be sure that this is the path that we want to take. Because sometimes we could be thrusted into a path that we don't want to travel because we feel like we have to uphold the legacy that was started within our families. So then there's this pressure that's building up as you're going down this path. So to be able to have that space and that time of solitude to confirm that this is where I should be, I just think is invaluable.
Mhm. And like, what a privilege that I was able to do that. And I think, that's true for jobs, but it's also true for life, right? Just
Yeah.
to be able to have that pause and be like, no, you know what? This brings joy to me. This is what I'm supposed to do. Like, so often people talk about like work-life balance, and like
Mhm.
anything where one is pitted against the other makes me nervous. But I often think like, gosh, I don't know if I have a work-life balance, but what I do brings me joy. And so, like that line kind of blurs. And to me, part of that is like the joy of being in education and what I get to do. It's the fact that I don't feel like it's a job. Like it's fun. And, Zooming and having a chat with you about education at 8:30 in the evening is fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a world where we think binarily about everything. So even with this idea of work-life balance, you just mentioned the fact that sometimes the work itself feels like life.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like work. So I know
Yeah.
some people would prefer to use the term work-life integration because you are merging the two worlds where both things can be true at the same time.
And especially in education, right? Like your podcast, Identity Talk, your identity, who you are as a person, walks into that classroom every day. And who those children are as people walks into the classroom every day, right? Like half your curriculum walks in with your kids, right? So yeah, to the idea of separating those two, I think is not a reality really. So yeah.
Yeah. But I want to dig into your primary secondary schooling because a lot of what people realize on this podcast is a lot of the stories that the guests tell, they stem from how they were brought up during that schooling period. Like you see the parallels between how they go about their work as an educator and how they grew up, the experiences that they had. And you've had a very transient experience. So being born in Sri Lanka and growing up as a refugee in Germany and then finding your way in Canada and then a whole bunch of other countries, you have a world of experience from those different contexts. So I'm wondering, how did that impact the way that you viewed yourself as a child that was navigating school at that time?
Yeah, yeah. So, like you said, I was born in Sri Lanka. There was a civil war, so my family left quite suddenly when I was around 5 years old, and we moved to Germany. I'd never been to Germany before. Never thought I'd end up in Germany. I don't think my parents did either. Didn't speak a word of German. Started off in school kindergarten, first grade. Had the loveliest teacher who spent time after school with me and who played games and taught me German. Learned German pretty quickly and ended up in gymnasium, which is kind of the highest level that you can get end up with because kids are kind of streamed after fifth grade.
Yeah.
And I ended up in a gymnasium with around 2,000 children. I was the only girl of color in the school. There was one other boy. And I remember that anywhere I went, people would know who I was because I was that girl at that school, right? And I remember I would go down. There were these stairways and they had railings, and I remember going down these railings, just sliding down these railings and having the most fun. I've always been I've always been like, energetic and colorful, and I think I was just like always looking out and never really realizing that I was different until people pointed it out. And it was pointed out quite a bit. And then when I was in sixth grade, almost before sixth grade finished, we moved to Canada because the rest of my family had, realized there was a war going on and had immigrated to English-speaking countries. So most of my mom's side of the family had gone to Canada. And so we ended up, my dad went first, and then we ended up joining my dad 4 years later in Canada. And so I got to Canada and my parents decided, it was almost the end of the school year. So you know what, Loretta, you've been through a lot. You don't have to go to school. So I stayed at home for like a couple of months, May, June, July, summer holiday, just hung out with my family. We did lots of stuff. We reconnected with my dad, who we hadn't seen in 4 years. And then my mom took me to the nurses, the school office and said, we'd like to register her for seventh grade. And she looked at my birthday and she said, no, she should be in eighth grade. And so they put me into eighth grade. I'd never been in an English schooling system before. And here I was in Canada, barely, like just finished sixth grade, not quite, and then moved into eighth grade. And I thought,
so you jumped a grade.
I jumped a grade. In Germany, I was good at school, but it came easy. So I never really spent time like learning. And I was the kid that sat in the back and played cards and caused trouble. In every parent-teacher conference, it was like, if Loretta applied herself, she would do so well in school. And most conferences were in German, and my mom spoke German, but not very well. So I'd go in there and translate, and I always managed to weasel my way out of these, conferences. But then we get to Canada, they put me into eighth grade. I have no friends, and here I am. I have no cultural currency. All of my, background is German. And so I became a really good student and ended up in a gifted program in high school, which would never have happened if I had stayed in Germany. So in a way, that helped out a lot. And then went to university, became a teacher, knew right away what I wanted to do. So and then moved to Singapore, backpacked across Australia, ended up back in Germany, and then moved to London, worked at the American School, and then came back to Germany and have been here a while. So in total, I've been at this school for 20 years. It's my 21st year at this school. I know. I say that out loud and I'm like, how is that possible? Who does that? So it's been a while. I've spent most of my life, childhood as well as adult, in Germany. Would I consider myself German? No. Would I consider myself Sri Lankan? That's also really hard. My parents gave me a very English name. They were both working in a missionary school when they met. My dad was an accountant. My mom was like a graduate teacher. And so they met in this like very missionary setting. And so they gave me this English name because, like you do when your kid is born, you want them to go to university overseas, right? Those things are kind of decided. And so they gave me that name and they brought me up speaking English. And it was only when I got to Germany that they panicked and were like, our kid doesn't speak Tamil. So they stuck me in Saturday school. So when I speak Tamil, people will often say to me, you sound like a white person. And, like my German's fluent, my English is pretty good. So it's one of those things where I grew up in all these different places. And even in the places that I grew up, I had different identities imposed on me, whether it be because of colonization or whether it be because of just the lenses that I was viewed at. And
Yeah.
I think because of that, I spent a lot of my time trying to fit in, trying to be like everyone else, trying to learn the language and the cultural currency of places. Yeah, and just kind of be. I think about like education and the way that I was brought up and the education that I experienced. And at that point, like my teachers were trying to help me be more of who they were, right? It was about
Right.
teaching you the history of Germany and the history of Canada and like, the conventions of and all of those things that went with it. And when I think about what I really needed at that point, I needed education to help me become more of who I was. And so when I think now as an adult, having children of my own biological children, but also the children in my care, what is it that I want for these kids that are also growing up between these cultures? Sometimes between the cracks of these cultures that have kind of fallen in between. And it's to help them find and become more of who they are, right? And so I think I can't say I had a horrible education. I think I had a great education, but I think that so much of my education reaffirmed to me that I needed to be more of something else.
Mm.
And it didn't give me the space to really find who I was. And so I think as an educator now, that's something that I'm so mindful of.
Talk for Educators Live podcast is just one piece of the work that we do under Identity Talk Consulting, which we've had since 2019. And since then, we've had the privilege of working with 40 different schools, districts, and organizations across the globe. And we want to continue to add to that number in this new year. So if you are a school, if you're an educator or an organization that's looking to receive professional development and consulting services within any of our pillars, whether it's anti-bias, anti-racist practices, culturally responsive teaching, or identity affirming education, we are the firm for you, and we love to learn more about your needs. When you have a chance, make sure you go to our website at identitytalk4educators.com to learn more about our services and to schedule a discovery call today. We love to hear from you. And that's a constant struggle that I even deal with, even now,
Yeah.
as a father to two young boys who are going into spaces where they're exposed to westernized culture. I mean, most of their life, they've been in international school settings. They don't know what it's like to live in the United States like I did. They don't know what it's like to live in Ghana and to be in that culture. So when I think about your story, it's a very common refrain that we hear in our ecosystem in international schools. I just think that we're just at a point where we really have to center these stories and get them out there, because I'm thinking about your own parents. They had to flee from their home country in Sri Lanka. So I'm sure that there are stories that you will want to know about your parents' birth country that they may not even want to share because it might just bring about some traumatic response. But yet, that's a part of who you are. So there's like a conflict there, I'm sure.
Absolutely, right? It like unpacking those layers because
Yeah.
part of me, like I'm sometimes in spaces where people will say to me, what's your real name? Like not your English name, but your real name. Like tell me your
Mm.
real name because I am gonna try. I want to learn your real name. I'm like, that's so kind. Loretta is my real name. I have never had another name. That is my real name. That's the name my parents gave me. And at one point in my life, I was like, why didn't you give me a beautiful Tamil name? Like why? Like, why did you rob me of that? Right. But on the other hand, they grew up in the society where having a Western name opened doors.
Hmm.
Having English opened doors. And
Yeah.
so they had to make that decision, right? Like, what do I want for my kid? What's going to set them up the best possible way? And so I think they sacrificed certain things, maybe even knowingly or unknowingly, right? So in order for me to open those doors, and that name has opened doors. I remember like my very first interview, I got it because of my name. I walked in, I was 22 and I hadn't even graduated university yet. And I went to a job fair and I said, I'm surprised you all wanted an interview with me. Can I ask you why? Right? And the wife said, well, it was actually my husband. And he said, well, Loretta Fernando, you speak English and you speak German and Tamil and you have a Hispanic name. I just wanted to meet you. But now that I met you, I'd love to offer you a job. Right. So I think and I mean, the amount of time people I've been emailing with, and then I meet them in person, they walk straight past me. And then I say, oh, hi, I think we've been emailing. And they said,
I am Loretta. It's
right,
me.
right. And they're like, oh, Miss Smith, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised, but you were not what I was expecting, right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how even just something as simple as a name gives you that identity, right? Like your name
Yeah.
is like so much, gives you, and in certain ways, if you isn't connected to that cultural identity, like even kind of maybe in that moment, I felt like had taken it away.
Mhm.
And at the same time, like has opened these doors for me. So Fernando is an interesting one as well, because my dad, so in Sri Lanka, in the Tamil culture, your dad's, like the last name changes all the time. So dad's first name becomes your last name. So you're constantly sort of changing around. And so
Okay.
my dad took the name Fernando because he wanted a neutral name in this place that he was living in. And then it just kind of stuck. And so again, like it's interesting, like the whole history of the name. And I've always been kind of very proud of my name, Fernando. But the realization, these realizations hit me, and I'm like, why? Like, didn't I not think of this before? Like, this is so, commonsensical. But the fact that Fernando is from the Portuguese colonizer,
Yeah.
right? And so again, it's again that history of like thing that I've always thought of myself as, oh, that's my Sri Lankan name. Well, it also has this whole story of this imposed identity, I guess. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So in Sri
Maybe that
Lanka, is it
gets even
common?
more complicated. Sorry, Kwame.
No problem. I was gonna ask, in Sri Lanka, is it common for Sri Lankans to have Portuguese names?
Yeah, yeah. Fernando de Silva, those are all
Mhm.
very, very Pereira, very popular names. Yeah.
And then, was there ever a time where you thought to yourself, I want to change my legal name to something that sounds a bit more Sri Lankan, like away from the colonizer name?
Yeah, with lots of A's in it. Yeah, I have thought of that. I did. At one point, I was like, this is not fair that you did not give me a proper name. Like, I was angry at my mom and dad, and then it was the realization that they had a tough choice to make too, And
Yeah.
so, yeah, names are an interesting thing. Yeah.
So now I want to transition into the work, what you
Hmm.
do as an educator. So you're with the littles, early
I used
childhood.
to be.
That was your love. That's your love. I know you're in
Yeah,
leadership now, but you started
yeah.
with the littles and they gave you so much joy. So just talk to me about those early years and how those years shaped you into the work that you're doing right now.
Yes. So now I really have the joy of working with 3-year-olds and under 3-year-olds all the way to 8th grade. And so when I first got into the position, I was like, oh, those middle schoolers, they smell funky, and I'm not so sure.
It's the best age range. Like that grade level, it's the best.
But I have to kind of say, I actually really, really like it. And I think
Yeah.
to myself, they're not so different from the littles either. They
Mm-mm.
just ask to be heard and to be seen in a different way. And so I think I actually really, really enjoy middle school as well. So I have to say, I love the fact that I can be with the littles one moment and then be with the older kids the other moment. And I love the fact that I am able to help those two grade levels connect in different ways. So that's really, really fun. In terms of like being with the littles, is just, I think it's fun, foundational, those early years. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
if you can kind of start to see life and education through those early years lenses, then you like the world opens up. Like kids come in with so much curiosity about the world, and they haven't quite picked up on all these social norms, right? Like people are always like, oh, kids say the, the darnest things, and they're always asking questions and they're so offensive. But they're not. They're really just asking you to explain what they're seeing. They're scientists. They're like watching everything that's going on, and
Yes,
they're
they
not
are.
afraid to ask, right? Like, is this true? Is this how it works? Like, and they ask that about the natural world, but they also ask it about the social world. And I think like if we're willing to like truly tune in and listen, and again help children be more of who they are rather than pour our knowledge of what we think is knowledge and what we think is right into them, then we're really able to pick up on where we might be able to do better and where we might be going wrong, And so I think just being with young children and the curiosity and the inquiry that they bring to life, and the way that they can sort of decipher what's going on in situations and just aren't afraid to kind of ask or question it, I think is just beautiful. And I hope that that's just being around that. I hope that continues to help me show up with curiosity wherever I go. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, beautifully. It does. And you've been at your school for 2 decades.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really look it. You look like you in your first, second, or third year, if I'm gonna be honest.
I love it. I
Yeah.
know. I know. And it's so fun because some of my former students I'm still in touch with, have done their MBAs and are getting engaged and moving in with their girlfriends. And they'll come back as student teachers. And it's just like, I still remember those eyes on the carpet. So, yeah,
No,
I
that's
know.
beautiful.
That's when you feel old. You're like, ah.
Mm. Well, I feel it right now. I got former students who I had during my first couple years who are now mothers and fathers. They have jobs, they're grown adults with their own lives, and it's just like, where did the time go?
Yeah.
We were just in the classroom together X amount of years ago doing this lesson, and now here you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
See, and that's how quickly it goes. So even if you're in the classroom and I feel like, it's going to be forever until, this makes an impact. No, it goes like that. And those kids remember those experiences, right? And how you make them feel. So, yeah.
So now, being at the same school for 20 years, which doesn't typically happen when you're in a national school ecosystem. I mean, for a lot of us, you're in a school for maybe 2, 3 years on average, and then you're moving on to the next post or next country. And then it's the same thing, then the next country. So to be able to have that sense of stability and to be able to teach multiple generations of different families,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the ways in which you've seen yourself grow into this leadership role from your time
Mm-hmm.
as a teacher up until now? What would you say are some of the lessons that you've been able to acquire along the
Mm-hmm.
journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To be honest, I never really saw myself in like formal traditional leadership. Um,
Mm.
I always thought like it's for someone else. I actually really like putting on, rubber boots and going to the forest and jumping in muddy puddles with kids. And the good thing about my job right now is I have a pair of rubber boots in I hate to call it an office, so I call it a classroom, in my
Okay.
classroom. And I still, I'll put them on and I'll run into the forest with the kids and then run back. And the other day, a fourth grader borrowed my rubber boots because I've got small
Oh,
feet.
nice.
so, so I never really saw myself sort of in traditional leadership, and I always thought, that was, kind of something for someone else to kind of do, like, and I was happy to be in the classroom with the kids, and I love that. What changed? Hmm, I think it's a combination of the way that I was raised, because we talked about that before, right? Your upbringing and how that shows up later in life.
Hmm.
And then I think also just kind of as I grew older and as I had children, what I started to kind of realize what kind of an impact I wanted to make as an educator and as a human. And I think all of those things kind of came together to make me think that, okay, well, you know what, maybe I would like to try formal leadership, and then kind of moving into that. So, I was born in Sri Lanka, former colony, parents quite strict, and always this idea of like, you work really hard, you put your head down, and you do the right thing, and you don't question authority, like you just do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a troublemaker. I just, except for when I was in German school and played cards in the back of the classroom, I was always, just worked really hard. Good worker bee, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah.
always like sort of just felt like, yeah, I'm a woman of color in an international school system, and I'm having these experiences, and they're like everybody else's experiences. They are just what they are. There's no big deal. And then I had my own two children, and they started going to international school, and they're multiracial, and they started to have experiences. And I think like becoming a parent, like wakens up something inside of you. There's a real like protectiveness that comes with that. And I think
Yes.
even if you're willing to like have certain experiences for yourself because you feel like it's okay, I can handle it, it's no big deal. When you even think that they might happen to your children, there's this protectiveness that you don't want that to happen to your kids, right? And so I think it was a realization, or maybe not the realization, but the admission to myself that my experiences as a woman of color were different than maybe those of my colleagues in the room next door. And,
Yeah.
And they were different because of our identities, that I started to share some of my stories. And actually I went to the ALOC Women of Color conference in November 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember I was like, I'm just going to tune in, I'll just, and I'll turn off the screen, I'll just listen. And I remember saying like, I'll be right back. I'm just going to, hop on this call. And I tuned in, and I don't even remember who spoke, but I started crying, and I couldn't stop crying. Like I just cried the whole day during the entire conference.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, there's something speaking to me here, like someone, like these people see me, like, and I have my screen off. They don't know me. We've never met before. And yet they know me, they see me. And like that loved me to start seeing myself. And so I think it was that experience. And I met somebody on there who Kira, and she was doing like a session in ALOC on podcasting. And I had never wanted a podcast. But then she started off by talking about imposter syndrome and how she felt like an imposter doing this podcast. And I was like, I can't leave now, because if I leave, she'll really think she's an imposter. So I just sat there and listened to this episode on podcast, even though I had no desire to have a podcast, because I didn't want her to feel like I didn't want her to feel bad if I left. And at the end, I, wrote to her and I said, I'm not interested in podcasting, but I loved your message. There's so much good stuff here. And she invited me to a women ed session. Yeah, it's a grassroots organization for more representation in leadership. And so I thought, I'll go. Nobody needs to know that I went to a session on more representation in women in leadership. I'll just go.
Yeah.
And so I went, and then I saw somebody I knew on screen, somebody who worked with me at the school, who was like, let's start the Frankfurt thing together. I want you to help me. And again, like this whole idea of like leadership, like it was almost like it was a dirty word to me. Like I shouldn't want to be in leadership. It's not what you want, And so then I ended up going, okay, well, helping out in the background and whatever. And it was only later that I was like, I need to like redefine leadership. Leadership doesn't have to be the title. Leadership is actually, like inspiring people, walking beside people, helping people out. And so that's kind of how it started. And that's, I hope, how I am able to show up now too.
Are you ready to take your commitment to identity affirming education to the next level? Then join the forum, the new and exclusive membership space for the Identity Talk community. With membership tiers starting at $3 a month, You'll get early access to podcast episodes, bonus content, our Qualms Quotes monthly newsletter, and monthly live Q&A sessions. You'll also unlock discounts on workshops and products, engage in community discussions, access exclusive community and networking opportunities, and even business ad roles during episodes if you're a sponsor level member. Whether you're an ally, advocate, co conspirator, accomplice, or sponsor, there's a place for you in the forum. So head over to identitytalk4educators.com/pricing plans /list and join the movement today. Yeah, and I love how you're able to redefine what leadership is and can be for those that have aspirations of becoming formal school leaders or in administration. Because I think a lot of times when you're in the classroom, there's this narrative about you transition to leadership and you're just locked into an office room that is away from the children, away from the things that you love about teaching. When in actuality, we can merge those worlds together. So going back to what we said about how we just think binarily about all these different ideas, like, okay, classroom teacher, school administrator, those are two different worlds, but they don't have to be. We can bring them together. Like we have people out there that are administrators, but 1, 2 days out the week, they are teaching a class just because they can and because they want to.
Mm,
So I think for me, and I'm sure the listeners who are listening to you, they'll probably want to know, how do you sustain that sense of worth and courage during times where it may be difficult? Because as a leader, you're going to go through some adverse periods because there's so much that you're juggling. So, what's your process like in terms
mm.
of sustaining that courage?
Mm, yeah, I think you make a really important point. I think not just it's important, it's crucial. It's crucial to be in the classroom, it's crucial to be around people. And I think
Yes.
just being with children and being with educators is what really sustains you. It's what nourishes you. So I think, and it's what informs you, like, and I think the other thing that we need to get rid of is this hierarchy, right? We see leadership here, we see teacher here. I'm just a teacher. Oh no, you are not. You
Yeah.
are a teacher, right? I'm just the leader. It's just different seats on the bus, and sometimes we need to take a different seat, and sometimes we move. And there is no hierarchy of like, I'm going to climb this ladder, like, like what are we all here for? And it's for the kids. And so at the end of the day, it's let's get rid of the binary and let's get rid of the hierarchy. I think that's really, really important to me. How do I sustain myself and my sense of worth? Again, I have a friend, a leader friend, who leaves me voice messages and says, Loretta, you're worth it. And I'm like, that's so sweet. Thank you. Because I
Sometimes
think,
it's all you need, right?
right, sometimes that's what you need. I remember when I first started taking more leadership roles, there was one colleague that I was really struggling with who I felt like all of a sudden I was getting a lot of pushback. And I said to someone, it's okay, it's okay. I just need to prove myself and then it'll be fine. And this person said to me, you don't need to prove anything. And it kind of dawned on me that I'd spent so much of my time justifying other people's behavior because I needed to prove myself. And they were right. I'd already proved myself. That is why I was in that position. And so I think there's several things, like how do I sustain that? It's community. So look
Mhm.
for community. I think ALOC is a great place to find community. If you are an aspiring leader or you're already a leader, then I would highly recommend the mentoring program. I think, especially in international schools where leaders of color are fewer, it is important to have that community so that you can show up with that that sense of who you are and your worth in those places, and find your community within your school as well, and outside. So I think that's important. And then keep going back to the root of it all, right? Be with people that are doing the work, that are in the ground. Get, like Brene Brown says, get into the arena, because unless you're in the arena, like, you don't really have much to say. So I think all of those things keep you going. The other space that I get a lot of courage and support and nourishment from is Story Workshop Studio. It's run by Susan Harris McKay and Matt Carlson. They wrote a book. She wrote a book called Story Workshop, and it's about integrating or the connection between literacy and the arts. And so it's really like yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's all about literacy and the arts, but it really is all about like how to show up in the world and how to
Yeah.
rediscover ourselves and our identities and be ourselves together with others and to make space for that. And it's about the arts and how the arts can help us kind of do that. And we have these beautiful, discussions and readings. And so anybody who's interested in that, I would highly recommend you join that space. Women Ed's been awesome for me too. And I read a lot and I write a lot. Reading, like, those are the conversations I kind of have. And writing to me is like, it's like a piece of clay, it helps me like figure out my thoughts and untangle
Yeah.
things and kind of just, and then when I share it out into the wider world, which sometimes I do, sometimes I keep them in my back pocket a little longer, the stories, but when I share them out into the wider world, like, I find so much connection with other people, and I find that I keep growing. So I think all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a potpourri of different strategies and different outlets that
Yeah.
helps you sustain your your drive, and also keeps you sane
Keeps you
as best
safe.
as it can.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I was getting a little discouraged with everything going on in the world right now. And I walked outside and I had this experience with my youngest son. And I just thought, like, I can't anymore. I just can't. Like, I'm done. Like, what's the point? Like, and I, like, that was the first time, like, I hit that low. I'm usually a really positive person, but it was like all the news coming in and everything else. And then I
Mm,
got on, I had signed up for a talk with Valerie Coer,
mhm.
who's the author of See No Stranger. And, I just heard her speak, and then I got her book and I started reading it. And it was just one of those things that, like, was just the most beautiful thing of, like, you are a part of me that I do not yet know, and, like, even, when people react with anger or fear, there's a part in there that is a part of me that is reflecting in there, that I can find. And yeah, so I think, yes, find find things that you can speak with and that speak to you, whether that be a book, whether that be people like right here, or this community that's just opened up because of the world that we currently live in, with internet and everything else. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're in a world where a lot of us thrive in productivity, and we do so in a way that sometimes causes us to get lost in it, to the point where you lose yourself and you have to recalibrate and get back to the essence of life. Like, why are we here? Why are we even doing this? Why do we feel the need to even be in front of a screen X amount of hours? What's the goal? And these are conversations that I have to have with myself, because I'm guilty of it, just like a lot of us are. And we got to
Oh, me
remember
too.
why, like, why are we doing all this? What's the point? And that's one of the tough things about what we talk about in terms of identity affirming work, right? Being there for students, centering their humanity. It requires us to dig deep and bring our full selves into it. That's the type of investment that's necessary in order for the work that we're doing to be done the right way with fidelity. And that could be very exhausting. But I want to make sure that we wrap things up, because I like how things are starting to unfold. And I do have a final question that will culminate everything. So, you're a fourth generation educator. You've had a lot of experiences. You've been in a lot of countries, and you've been able to be in these different worlds. And now you are a leader in a school. You are doing it in a way that is authentic to who you are. So, my question for you is, Loretta, how do you stay true to the teacher in you?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think I would ask myself, how do I stay true to the learner in me? Because I think
Mm.
I got into teaching because I loved the curiosity that the children brought, and the way that they would always see the world and remind me to stop and smell the roses, like the wonder of a flower or the wonder of a stone. And so I think the way that I stay true to the teacher in me is by staying true to the learner in me, like continuing to learn and grow and see that curiosity, and to always be on my feet and in the spaces around me, be in the forest with my rain boots on, or on the carpet, or in the art room, or on the playground, and having those conversations with people, no matter what their age. So, yeah.
And Loretta, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your vulnerability and for modeling what that can look like for others. Because we do have to get our stories out there, because it can inspire somebody and it can help somebody who needs to hear it. So I appreciate you for being so open today. And before,
Thank you for
yeah,
having me.
this is why you're here. We need to hear your story, and I'm glad that you're able to do that. But before you do go, please know how they can connect with you on social media. And also, if there are any programs or services that you do provide for other educators in schools, please use this time to share that as well.
All right. Yeah. So, LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me, Loretta Fernando-Smith. And I have my own website as well, lorettafernandosmith.com. And what else? Oh, yeah. And I've started a Substack. I just found out that I'm going to be writing a book. It's going to be a while in the making, but the book is all about me. Thank you. Me, and then you, and then us. And so, how do we seeing ourselves, seeing others, and seeing us together? And because that is the message, I also want to make sure I embody that message in the way that the book comes about or is born, as well as the message in the book. And so I'm hoping, I want to try something different. I want to try and see if I can go on this writing journey with people. And so I'm going to try and start putting things out there and inviting people's opinions and views and voices, as I write the book and as I go on this journey. So, yeah, check out my website, sign up. I'm hoping to kind of get that started, through some short videos and maybe some Substack stuff. That's a blog.
Oh, exciting, exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kwame.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's just beautiful to be able to write your own book and to go along that journey, which has its leaps and bounds. But once you get to that finish line, once you get there and you birth this book to the world, it's the most gratifying feeling. It's
Mm.
just gratifying.
It's
Yeah.
like, we were talking about it, and it's like my journey back to myself, right? Like I said at the
Mm.
beginning, I felt like I was learning how to be like others, and now I'm learning how to be myself, and I keep learning how to be myself. And this book is part of the journey, and I'm hoping, others will come on this journey with me back to themselves, right? So it's almost like my therapy. But yeah.
And that's when the best content comes out, when you just tap into your soul, when you tap into your own experience. It makes the process sometimes harder, but then at times easier, because now it's like, oh, I gotta relive this moment. I gotta tap into
Mm,
this time in my life where it was a struggle.
Mm.
Let me tap into a time when it was a bit more joyful. Let me do that. But yeah, I'm excited for this journey, and I'm sure people will be on the lookout for the Substack articles and also videos you put out there. So thank you for inviting us to be a part of this journey. That's going to be exciting.
Yeah,
And
please reach out. I love connecting.
yeah,
I think the more we connect, the less we work in silos, the easier it is. The easier it is. So for sure,
that
yeah,
part,
connect. Yeah, reach out.
that part for sure.
Yeah.
And we're going to wrap it up here, people. Thank you all for coming on to this new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And on behalf of Loretta, I want to wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.
Auf Wiedersehen. Portobaren.